behavior.
Okay, thank you. Yield back my time.
Gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chaffetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the panel for being here. I think it's an important topic because obviously the rapid expansion of technology, technology great as long as it's used in the right and proper way. I want to talk a little bit about the Jones case, if we could. Apologies, I walked in a little bit late. I was interested by Justice Sotomayor's opinion on this. Obviously, a 9-0 ruling is fairly conclusive, but it does beg the question of what other areas should this be applicable to. From your perspective and experience, our current Justice Department and the implementation by the FBI and others, have they taken this Jones case and implemented the way you see it? It should be implemented, or are they missing something here? What should the Justice Department and the federal government be doing with that Jones case? We'll start with Mr. Calabresi, if we could.
Well, obviously the Jones case deals with location tracking, and in the ACLU's view, the government has been deficient in applying Jones. We believe that a majority of the court, no matter how you read it, said that systematic tracking of individuals over time is an invasion, it implicates the Fourth Amendment and is a search. Given that rationale, we believe that all manner of tracking currently undertaken by the government, whether that's cell phone tracking, whether that's tracking of a GPS device by a car, implicates the Fourth Amendment and should be done with a warrant. I think it's a very interesting question as to whether that same rationale should be expanded to drones. I mean, clearly drones could be used to track an individual for long durations in a very detailed manner. Perhaps U.S. v. Jones will also come to regulate how drones are used as well.
Anybody else care to comment? Yes.
Well, I would just say this about Jones. I think the story on Jones and the scope of Jones is unwritten. Certainly, Justice Sotomayor and Justice Alito's opinion talk about electronic monitoring. Justice Scalia's opinion is very careful not to rely on the Katz test and not to rely on any sort of concerns about electronic monitoring. His opinion was solely about the physical intrusion and the purpose for the governmental conduct. And I think if you read the most recent ruling from the court in this area, Florida versus Jardines, with again Justice Scalia writing the majority opinion, you again see the focus of Scalia's concern on the physical intrusion in that case. So I think with respect to Jones, I'm not in a position.
But what's your opinion of that? I mean, it seems to be short-sighted to think that just the physical intrusion.
I agree. I agree with that. My own personal opinion is that the concerns with the monitoring are more important because we are already at a time where government doesn't need a physical intrusion.
No, you can triangulate things electronically without actually physically attaching something, and that's my concern, Mr. Chairman. As we look at this, I really do. I have a geolocation bill that we've done with Senator Wyden in a bipartisan way. You've been very supportive of this. I don't think it is just merely the physical intrusion of attaching a GPS device and technology over the course of time. I do think, and let me get to the other two gentlemen's opinion of this, I think one of the things we need to look at, Mr. Chairman, is airspace. That if you have private property, and you may have something very small, you may have something large, let's say you have a 5-acre parcel of land, I do think there's a reasonable expectation of privacy that isn't just limited by walking down the street and, okay, you put up a fence, but I think the airspace is something in general that we should look at. But maybe if you could talk to that and the Jones, and I want to leave time for our last, the other person as well.
Right, so Congressman, what you've articulated as the reasonable expectation of privacy that I think you expect and that your constituents expect is something that's broader than the Supreme Court has articulated. So, going back to the Oliver case and the other aerial surveillance cases, going to Katz, what we knowingly expose to the public isn't a matter of Fourth Amendment concern. And so, if you want to protect the airspace over someone's yard and whatnot, it will require legislation because the court doesn't seem prepared to identify that yet.
Like, time's almost up. If we can get you.
Yeah, I actually read Jones more optimistically than perhaps many with respect to prohibiting long-term extended surveillance. A majority of the justices, Justice Alito was joined by 3 justices in a concurrence, that makes 4, and then Justice Sotomayor agreed with Justice Alito's statement that long-term tracking itself, even without with the attachment of the device was reasonable, that violated a reasonable expectation of privacy. And even Justice Scalia, in his majority opinion, said it may be unconstitutional. So I'm actually quite encouraged that the Supreme Court would find that unconstitutional.
I think that is the right direction. I think the chairman will go back.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Richmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mack, let me start with you, because a lot of conversation and a lot of what goes on depends on reasonable expectation of privacy. And as we discussed another bill, at what point do you think it's ever going to get to a point where we have to say what a reasonable expectation of privacy is, period? Because the more and more that things evolve, the more and more I think that I have any expectation of privacy. And at some point, will someone say your expectation of privacy is just unreasonable?
Of course, I agree with you. And I think this committee and the Congress in general can use their powers under Section 5 of the 14th Amendment to enforce the Fourth Amendment and say, yes, a reasonable expectation of privacy includes the following.
And Mr. Calabrese, you talked earlier about the fact that we have tort laws and other things for non-governmental actors. As I watched the news this morning, there's an incident in New York where a guy took pictures of people in the adjacent building, didn't capture their face, but caught very intimate moments, and those pictures are now in a gallery selling for $8,000. The subjects of them are very upset, and the lawyers that talked about it said there's no recourse for them. And I guess it's that sort of thing that concerns me in terms of if we get to drones, how do we reconcile that?
They are very difficult questions, but they're very difficult questions both because they are potential real invasions, but also because of the powerful need to protect the First Amendment. I think that peeping Tom laws would deal with a drone right up on someone's window, across the building, but with a powerful camera. You know, it's a harder question. The First Amendment protects our right to gather information for really important reasons, regulating how government operates, giving people the ability to talk about what's going on in their lives, share information, the obvious need to help to protect the press. We've seen that this week. So we're going to have to balance those. We do think that there's a lot of law in this area, so I think we're going to have to tread carefully in regard to the First Amendment. And I do think there are more existing protocols and controls around First Amendment-related activity for private use than there are for the Fourth Amendment space and government use.
And we talked a little bit about the drones and the fact that they'll have the capability of license plate readers, but my police chief is excited about the fact that he's putting license plate readers on every stoplight. So at what point do you think we get to or do you think police now would need some authorization to record and store the data from license plate readers? For example, if you have a spree of burglaries, that they can go back and see if there's any car that went through the red lights close to any of those homes. I mean, can they just store that information?
I mean, I believe that there's a reason that we have license plate readers. I believe, for example, looking for stolen cars is a perfectly appropriate reason to have a license plate reader. I believe that information should be destroyed at the end of the shift, once the purpose that you gathered it for is no longer operative. And I do believe that that's because if we don't do that, we're going to live in a society where we have mass surveillance. I mean, we live in a world of records now. Everything we do generates a record. So if we're going to start saying, let's just keep it just in case, our entire lives are going to be out there to be investigated anytime someone wants to poke through those records.
And that's what I was worried about, the just in case. Did anyone else want to comment on that?
I guess I'll just add that while I fully am sympathetic to these concerns, there's a gray area here. It's very difficult. I mean, if as Mr. Calabrese suggested, all of these records were destroyed at the end of a shift, suppose there was a kidnapping or a missing persons report that wasn't reported for 48 hours after it happened. Again, I don't think anyone would deem it a positive thing if we had intentionally destroyed information that might have led us to solve that more quickly. So I don't claim to have any perfect answer, but these are hard questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back. I see my time has expired.